Welcome back, everybody, to the show. The government has indeed shut down, but this show has not yet. And what does that mean? Well, quote unquote, non-essential services will come to a screeching halt. And then essential services will happen, but federal workers won't be getting paid. And then the concerning part, way beyond normal past government shutdowns, is how Trump and Russ Vought are planning on using this shutdown to leverage to continue dismantling the government that they'll now blame on the shutdown and Democrats, but is already what they've been wanting to do. We do have some frightening details from the meeting that happened between Trump and Democrats and some different updates. But first, Politico reports the White House Budget Office is instructing federal agencies to prepare reduction in force plans for mass firing. So not the normal furlough process, not the normal work without pay process, but mass firings like they were already doing during a possible government shutdown, specifically targeting employees who work for programs that are not legally required to continue. And Trump was on the record saying a couple notable things, like how this actually could end up being good because we could cut benefits even more. His wording, almost, he used the word benefits and talked about cuts that Democrats wouldn't like, and then firings, and we'll get to this later in the show, of Democrats, which would be an insanely partisan way to go about this, obviously. But there were some photos released by the White House of the meeting that turned out to be a disaster and a failure pretty clearly, because Trump, I don't think, has even a little bit of interest of negotiating in good faith with the demands that are being made by Democrats to agree to extend funding of the government. You can see a couple notable things in this photo. Mike Johnson seemingly upset. Hakeem Jeffries gesturing his direction. Diet Coke on the table for Trump, or maybe one of the other people. And what seemed to be Trump's obsession is the Trump 2028 hat. And then Trump there pointing at Hakeem Jeffries. And you can see very prominently those Trump 2028 hats. Let me show you what Vance had to say about that.
President Trump, he shared some pictures from the Oval Office meeting with Chuck Schumer and with Hakeem Jeffries, with Speaker Johnson and with Thune. And we wanted to ask you about any insight into that meeting, because the last shutdown, Mr. Vice President, was 35 days. Americans can't go, here are the pictures, Americans cannot go that long without getting a paycheck or being furloughed. So can you give us some insight into what they talked about, maybe how we can come to a compromise?
And the hats?
The Trump trolling them with 28 hats.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. That's the most important part. There were also the Trump 2028 hats, which I think made the majority or the minority leader in both the House and the Senate very uncomfortable. But look,
President Trump, he shared some.
Shouldn't it make everybody uncomfortable that he keeps, well, even if we take your argument, which is he, this is big silly time, isn't it? How would you have reacted if you had Obama 2016 hat back when he was supposed to be leaving office? You would have had a Fox News freak out. But it's all giggles and laughs to them. And some reporting from inside the room is that, again, like Trump has shown in all these different important conversations, even with people he's supposed to be hostile with, he just brings up, look at the hats, look at that, and has this fixation with it, which doesn't feel great, especially when you should be working on something more productive, which is contending with what I think are reasonable demands, especially if just some of them would be accepted, which is undoing some of the damage that the Trump administration has pushed through to our healthcare system. Here's Caitlin Collins.
The last two government shutdowns that happened came during President Trump's first term in office. The last shutdown, which was also the longest in modern American history, did cost the U.S. economy $11 billion.
So while this will be used and a lot of the discussion and the political debate will become very gamified, there are real impacts. Wasted money, people's lives being impeded, and then this being used as justification for further, more long-term, as I said, dismantling of the government. Bernie Sanders was having no BS.
A response to Republicans like House Speaker Mike Johnson and others who say the subsidies don't expire until the end of December. We have time to negotiate on those and we can find some common ground.
Well, for a start, common ground, really. They have had months. And for the first time in modern history, they have not sat down. What has always happened is a majority, he talks about how 13 occasions they worked with the Democrats. It's true, because the Democrats in that case sat down with them. So what you need is a bipartisan solution. What these guys have said, it's my way or the highway. This is the way it's going to be. And that is kind of what Trumpism is about. That's that authoritarian tendency that we're seeing in America right now.
So are you telling me you're willing to vote no every time Leader Thune brings this up?
I am not going to allow. Let me be clear. All right, you can quote me on this. You can quote me on, as we say in Vermont, till the cows come home. I will not let tens of thousands of fellow Americans die because they're thrown off of health care. In my state, people cannot afford a doubling in the health care premiums. We are already paying the highest prices in the country for health care. People just can't afford it. And what the Republicans have got to do is go into their hearts and go back into their constituents. Ask their constituents in Louisiana, where Johnson is from, do you think it's a good idea to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to people like Bezos and Musk and Zuckerberg, the richest people in this country, in order to throw people off the health care they have? I think the answer will be a resounding no. So I hope the Republicans...
Yeah, so everything becomes, during this process, a blame game, and later in the show you're going to see the different ways, messaging wise, that the White House is trying to make this a Schumer shutdown or a Democratic shutdown. And the reality is, whenever you need a coalition, a bipartisan group of people to accept a funding resolution, then that means the people you're trying to get to sign on to that, even if they're in the minority party with less power, have some leverage. And so it all comes down to, not is there this cosmic answer of who is to blame, which you can pretty simply make a compelling argument that there wasn't any shutdowns during Biden, there were during Trump first time, and now again during the second time. Maybe it's a little bit of a problem with his governance, because there's always this negotiation process, or at least in the modern era, that's how it's been leveraged. And what we're more battling over is, do we think the demands are reasonable? And Republicans brought up demands during the same thing. Many of them I thought were ridiculous. And then an agreement was made whenever Biden was in power and Republicans were in the minority or had a majority in one of the chambers. And that's just not something Trump is doing. He's not negotiating, and instead is getting all of his supporters to just lie about what it is the Democrats are arguing for. So I don't really care about, let's brand this the blank shutdown. Yeah, the government shut down, and it's because the two parties didn't agree on funding. I just find the reason Democrats haven't agreed yet to be very reasonable. And it's a rare chance where they have power to leverage. And it's unacceptable to me that Trump has done the damage to our healthcare system that he has. It's unacceptable to me that Republicans wouldn't be willing to concede on extending ACA subsidies. Otherwise, health insurance for millions of Americans is going to get so much more expensive. That's unacceptable. And I think leveraging the little power they have right now to try to reverse that's good. And not to mention all of the people being kicked off of their health insurance because of Trump's big bill. More from Bernie. I like how he said, as we say in Vermont, until the cows come home. We all say that. You can't take that in Vermont. We all say that. While you continue watching this, please do click the subscribe button if you appreciate the show. It's free, but it supports the work that we do.
Now, what Republicans want is to pass what is called a clean CR. In other words, maintaining the status quo. And some of you may say, well, what's the problem? It's not bad, it's not good, we'll maintain the status quo. Here's why that is an awful idea and why all of us are opposed to that. In the last year, as many of you know, under Trump's big, beautiful bill, which to my mind was one of the worst pieces of legislation passed in modern history, under that bill, 15 million people on Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act will be thrown off of health care. A number of studies out there have suggested that up to 50,000 Americans a year will die because they are no longer able to go to the doctor. Very shortly, you are going to be receiving notices from your insurance companies that your rates, your insurance premiums, are going up by, on average, some more, some less, 75%. Yeah, you heard that correctly. 75%. Now, right now, we have a broken healthcare system. Nobody can afford healthcare. You're ready for a 75% increase in your insurance premiums. You're not. Nobody is. On top of all of that, you got a HHS, Health and Human Services Secretary now, who's trying to undermine vaccine protocol, one of the great developments in modern science, keeping our kids healthy.
How dare you say that, Bernie? Go back to Vermont with the cows until the cows come home. Yeah, it's very sinister what's being done here, because this is actually, just so you know, I remember one of the times that Republicans were negotiating with Biden, it was like, undo your entire agenda and give us everything that we want, and gut the IRS for no reason, which would only let wealthy tax cheats get away with more wealthy tax cheating. And then they ultimately got to some concessions that ended up not being that great for Republicans, but to Kevin McCarthy's credit, he did bend the knee on some things, as you might remember. But in this case, it's so upsetting to see a lot of the messaging coming out of the White House, because it reminds you that the governance that serves us, actually, it's not just a series of sick jokes or some crazy game or just about the absurdity of Trump in the media. There's real consequences to how Trump just being totally willing and then leading his party into being totally willing, beyond what all politicians have done for a long time, to just detach themselves from any common facts. So what their argument has been is what Democrats laid out was a sheet of paper that said, we will fund the government if you give all undocumented immigrants free health insurance. So then if that's what their side's hearing, of course they're going to think it's absurd to negotiate with Democrats in good faith. So then, of course, Trump's going to have the Trump hats and be drinking Diet Coke and having a good old time posting Hakeem Jeffries AI videos instead of being serious, when in reality, he just laid out there, and you kind of feel in your heart how serious it is. That, first of all, undocumented immigrants are qualified for coverage under the ACA or under Medicaid federally. And so that can't be a part of what they're asking for. But what they are asking for is for just Americans, them not to see their health insurance costs skyrocket. And I don't know how much they're expecting to get Trump to concede on the second part, but for him to undo some or all of the Medicaid cut that they pushed through. And if the two sides, if one of them wasn't willing to just completely invent this alternate universe where it's, we want Medicare for all for just undocumented immigrants, then we could have a pretty, I think, simple, clear-cut negotiation, which is Trump could say, I won't bend the knee on the Medicaid stuff for some reason. I won't undo what we did in the big, beautiful bill, but I'll extend the ACA subsidies that you're asking for. And then they find some common ground that would be kind of a good shift. But that's not even close to happening. Maybe Trump will get there, because Trump really does see it as more beneficial to him to tell those lies while getting a justification to use the shutdown to do a bunch of stuff that he's been wanting to do already. And little bonus for them, which we'll talk about later. They don't have to swear in the new member of Congress, and thus the Epstein files won't come out. So I don't know if all that's connected, but the Epstein files aren't going to come out while the government's shut down. Oh, darn. So here's a few. Now, just on a little bit more of a lighthearted note, I'll go talk about this in a second. I got into it a little bit with commenters last night. I don't know why I did that, but we will have a little bit more fun with these clips. Serious, little fun.
Every Republican who's gone on TV the last 12 hours or so has called this the Schumer shutdown. What do you say about that name? Senator Schumer, can you hear me?
I can't hear.
Senator Schumer, can you hear me? I don't think Senator Schumer can hear me right now. Maybe the government shutdown included audio on Capitol Hill.
Hey, John, that was good. That was good. I appreciated that joke, but I never understand these cable news outlets with all of the problems they have. So there's it cutting out, but they have a production that we just don't even have. And we've done so many interviews, and so rarely does it cut out if you're just on Zoom. But then the other part is still, you'll have them be like, all right, Senator Schumer, what's your take on this? Well, I think that this crazy delay, which does not come through on just normal Zoom calls, or do we still do, what's the other one, the old one, Skype? Do people use Skype? Did Skype shut down? I think Skype shut down. And then you could tell here, because I and others have been critical of when it feels like Democrats aren't meeting the moment, and I'm giving them a lot of credit here, that it takes a little something to put a lot on the line to fight for the healthcare changes that they are. And I credit them with that. One of the things that got memed, though, was back the last time when Schumer was like, I wrote a strongly worded letter. And so this time, I think he had seen that pushback. So he goes, we wrote a strongly worded letter. I mean, we demanded.
Hakeem and I sent a letter in late July. We demanded, actually, to them. We demanded that they sit down with us because we needed to work this out in a bipartisan way. And let me just...
So it is funny how kind of the criticism you can notice. We wrote a letter. We demanded. It's different because it was a demand. Well, where'd you demand? A letter? Well, but it was a strongly worded. Shoot, dang it. I'm using that phrase again. But again, I mean, them zeroing in, maybe they saw the show, on just repeat as many times as you can. They'd rather shut down the government than protect your health care and release the Epstein files on loop, on loop, on loop. Because that is what we're seeing here. This was also kind of funny.
These disastrous Trump cuts.
I do admire someone who doesn't even go back. Just, you know what? My mouth wants to say trunk cuts. All right, we're going there. So that was interesting. And then back to something really irritating. Mike Johnson, credit here to George Stephanopoulos. Trump has poisoned my brain a little bit. And the other term he uses sometimes is I've read it too many times, Stephanopoulos. Thank you. And he did a really good job of bringing up to Mike Johnson the truth here. Because a lot of these hosts are like, why, Mr. Republican, why are you not willing to concede on these points? And then the Republican goes, because they're wanting to fund healthcare for all the illegals. And then the host is like, okay. And they have the same ability I do to go before the interview, check if that's true, because they're going to say it. And I think Stephanopoulos did a good job here.
The Democratic proposal is designed to prevent millions of Americans from losing their health insurance, losing Medicaid coverage, or paying higher health care premiums. Why are you against that?
That's an absurd statement, what you said there. Let's be clear about what happened last night, George. No, George, let me tell you what happened last night. Everybody can go and review the facts for themselves. 44 Senate Democrats voted to reject a clean, nonpartisan continuing funding resolution to keep the United States government open. The Democrats said instead that they wanted to give health care to illegal aliens instead of keeping critical services provided for the American citizens. That's what happened, plain and simple. Every Democrat in the House, except one, voted against the clean continuing resolution. It was nonpartisan in nature. There are no policy riders on it that Republicans favored. It's exactly what Chuck Schumer and other Democrats voted for in March. But they've changed their tune. They changed their tune because Chuck Schumer is having political problems right now. That's just a simple fact, and everybody knows it. He's trying to outrun the far left portion of his base, so he's decided to inflict pain on the American people.
That's the reality of what we're facing. Here are the facts. The proposal does not provide health care for illegal immigrants. Illegal immigrants cannot buy health care under the Affordable Care Act. They cannot receive health care subsidies. No. Illegal immigrants are ineligible for Medicare, Medicaid, and the Children's Health Program. The Democratic bill does not make them eligible.
Boom. That was great. That's how you... Now I feel boiling up a lot of rage at why this is so unusual. So many interviews. Not on Fox. I'm talking CNN. and ABC, other places, and all of them have these Republicans on and then don't say anything as they go, well, they just want to fund. And that's super important to clarify, because it makes a little bit more clear, which is what clarify means. Good job, Luke. What's taking place here. I got distracted because of our next segment. If you're watching this as a YouTube video, go find this one about JD Vance.